Three, two, one. Welcome to Futuristic episode 4, and which is ironic because it's been about 4 weeks since we recorded episode 3. Not bad for a weekly podcast. How are you, Samo? Where have you been?
Mate, I had a month of travel actually, but episode 4 in 4 weeks, that was planned. Come on. This is the level. We want symmetry in all areas.
Are you good? Are you,
Oh, mate, I
you had
really
a good
am
month?
good. Had a good
That's
month.
good.
Had a good month, a good earn. I was out and about. Geez, got deep into this wormhole. I don't know how far it goes, Cam.
Well, a lot's happened since we last spoke. GPT came out with plugins for everybody. They've now got Bing built in. I don't know if you've played around much with the plugins. I found it kind of a slow, buggy experience so far, but it's the beginning of things to come. I don't know about what you've been doing with AI. I've mostly been using it for the last month to write custom bedtime stories for Fox. You'll say, hey, come use GPT to tell me a story about X, Y, and Z, and I'll get it to write it on the spot and then tell it to him, which is always fun. See what it comes up with. I use it every day for Excel, man. Like, it's completely changed my world with Excel still. And I'm still using it for Italian lessons every day. We'll get into our big news stories in a second, but tell me, what have you been doing with tech that you think is cool and has been blowing your mind in the last 4 weeks, SS?
Yeah, I've been really getting into Agent GPT to run projects for me. And I find that its implementations, again, like you said, very buggy. But you know, one thing that it does better than you expect is it gives you a framework for project management that I think is better than any of the project management software out there. So I've asked it to do some things for me and set out a plan, build me a website which does this and do some certain things. And it gives a set of tasks which it's meant to implement itself. It's buggy on implementing them, but the framework for the project management that it lays out is extraordinary. And so this is one of those classic examples of the externalities or the unintended use case actually being better. It doesn't really achieve the end objective yet. I find that it's really buggy, like you've said. But where it's going, wow, this is what I've been saying on stage. Everyone says, well, where are we going to go with AI? And we've spoken about it before. We're all going to have a personal AI. But here's the verbiage we'll use. You'll be in your weekly meeting with your manager and they'll be sitting down and they'll say, hey, Cam, how's the project going? And you'll say, my agent's working on it. It'll be finished by about 2 p.m. Friday. Like, we're going to say that. All of us within the next 2 years will be saying that. And the recursion is so quick now, the iterations on what's happening. And I think that the large language models, there's been a lot of naysayers out there saying, oh, large language models don't understand anything. Here's my thought. It doesn't have to. It doesn't matter. This is where we need to redefine intelligence. Intelligence isn't understanding. Intelligence is the ability to create something that wasn't there before on a set of instructions.
And to take a complex set of information and do something with it. You know, I saw this clip, by the way. We're 4 minutes into our 1 minute introduction. I saw this old interview the other day. I saved it to play on the show, but we don't have time. But it was like a bunch of, it was John Searle, I think, American philosopher in the early 70s, talking about intelligence and AI back then and what it would mean and why, you know, he's using his Chinese room analogy that he was famous for.
Yes.
But I think that you're absolutely right. And I've been saying this like for decades. Like when you come up with, when people would talk about AI and is it conscious, it doesn't matter. You know, is its consciousness the same as human consciousness? Is its intelligence the same as human intelligence? It doesn't matter. Is an octopus's intelligence the same as human intelligence? Who knows? Who cares? Can it do cool shit? Yes, it can do super cool shit. Octopuses are awesome.
That's the point. And this is like,
if it can do cool shit, that's good enough. You know?
And another analogy to this is Kurzweil, who talks about the idea that we're, you know, simulated reality. Are we in a simulation? And he actually had the greatest answer. He said, if we're in a simulation, if we're not in a simulation, is irrelevant. Because the point is, if it is a simulation, it has a certain set of rules related to physics, and we try and uncover those rules. Some we know, some we don't, and we try and behave in the best way based on the incentives in our so-called biological beings to achieve our desired outcomes. If we're in a simulation, if we're not, what's the difference? And it's the same with intelligence.
I would argue that if you knew this was all a computer simulation, philosophically, how would it change how you looked at your life?
It wouldn't change mine at all, because what I don't want to do is be deleted in the game or make a mistake so it's game over for me. I want to play the game, whether or not I'm simulated or not. And you could argue that, let's just use the word Big Bang, which is kind of as far as this thing goes, or multiverse. It's like, well, does it matter? If that's the simulation, then everything is a simulation in some capacity.
Well, it depends. You know, as you know about me, I don't believe in free will. I don't believe it exists. I believe everything obeys the laws of physics, including our brains. But I think for a lot of people, that's still a huge stumbling block. But if they knew they were a simulation and their entire life, every thought, decision, and action they and the people around them make was determined by coding, it would have a profound impact on how they saw themselves, and an impact for the better too, I might add. But we're off the track. We're 6.5 minutes into our one, like, just for the audience. Steve is obsessed with this idea that we're going to do this thing to time limits and segments. And I'm like, no fucking way. The two of us, man. When
we can get through it in an hour. We can get through it. I just want to pick up on one thing.
No, we don't have time. We don't have time. We're 6.5 minutes in. Sorry, I've got to keep you to the clock. Okay. Now we're starting our 10-minute top 3 in tech segment for the week. Let's see how we go with this. Couple of top 3 big news stories. There's been a lot. I mean, we can only squeeze a couple in. I think the real big one this week was NVIDIA's announcement at Computex. The keynote from the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, at Computex in Taipei this week, showed off what they're calling the Omniverse Avatar Cloud Engine, ACE, which can create real-time interactive AI NPCs. For those of you over the age of 25, an NPC is a non-playable character, complete with improvised voice dialogue and facial animation. So you're in Red Dead Redemption 2, you write, like if you'd play Red Dead Redemption 2 now or any other pretty good open world game, you go up to an NPC, just a character standing on the street, and you say something to it. It's going to have a couple of stock phrases that it will reply to you as like, bugger off, go away, leave me alone, don't get too close to me or I'll pull a gun on you. It's all pre-coded in. What he demonstrated was their new engine will enable the NPCs to just have free-form, AI-generated, generative AI conversations with you. But the thing is, not only will it have the conversations, the voices are generated in real time. The animation is generated, all the lighting, all the vector graphics, everything is all generated in real time by their AI engine. And their share price went up about 25%.
Just on that announcement.
Just
on the share price, Cam. So it's gone up by, I think, about 240% since last October. It was like $100 and something, 400-ish now, nearly 300%, sorry. And it's done a lot of things. It's not only that chip that put it up by 25%. It's been going crazy because they make the GPUs, which are different to the general microchips that you find in cars and laptops and iPhones, which were started for gaming. But it turns out that they're incredible for AI. And it turns out also that companies like Microsoft and Google need to upweight the number of chips they have as they move towards generative AI engines instead of search engines. And so the volume of chips that they'll sell will be crazy. But it actually, history repeats itself, Cam. The one thing that really stood out to me in what you said was the real-time element. And if we think back to the early web, showing our age and our gray hairs, you might remember dialing in to the web, and nothing was real time then. A video took a long time to upload. You couldn't just sit on the train and watch Netflix. Real time 4K video streaming into a little piece of devil glass in your hand. It took a long time to download things. Nothing was real time for the first kind of 15 years of the graphical internet. And right now what we have is generative AI, which is not real time. Once generative AI becomes real time, oh my God, who knows what's real? Who knows what's going on? How quick things can be created. It's just going to invent this kind of mirror world where you have one world which is real and one world which is generative. And it's almost hard to decipher which is which because it all happens in real time. The one saving grace we have at this moment is that none of it's real time. So you can almost decipher something based on when it lands on your screen and in your world. But once they both land simultaneously via these types of chips, oh my God, I don't know what the world becomes. I thought you just disappeared there, Cam. You went so still. You're there.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I
I
heard
didn't hear
something
that.
weird. What was that?
It was a dial-up, man. It was the dial-up.
Oh, I heard the end of it. Wow, I only heard the end of it. I heard zzz, you know what I thought it was?
Oh, it must have got filtered out by Zoom.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. And I thought you were glitching out on it. That's what I thought, the dial-up sound.
I played the dial-up sound, and I don't know about for you, but it still gives me warm and fuzzy feelings hearing that dial-up modem sound. Because for the kids that weren't around back in the early to mid 90s, you could try dialing into the internet back when it was, well, even before it was 25K, when it was like 15. And the lines would be busy quite often. You could spend an hour trying to connect to the internet and you wouldn't be able to get through. And then finally, when you heard the handshake, you were like, yes, Windsock proxy for the win.
I
I finally got in. Yes,
exactly.
Now I can spend my $5 an hour on getting very, very slow internet.
Yeah. Just one other thing really quickly on NVIDIA is that it's really interesting. I actually think it's exciting because, you know, we talk about risk and return. And I think that one of the big mistakes that Western markets made in terms of globalization was handing over the keys of the castle of how to produce everything and get everything produced somewhere because it was a low-cost labor market. That puts you at geopolitical risk. And the fact that there's an American chip maker actually getting some momentum is, I think, a good thing. And I've talked a lot before about deglobalization to reduce geopolitical risk. Risk and return is interesting. You get a higher return if you take more risk in all things, in all types of investing. It turns out that globalization and offshore gets a higher return, but also increases your geopolitical risk. So this is kind of interesting and exciting as well.
Yeah, but when they did that, nobody thought China was ever going to be a political risk or an economic risk. They were the sick man of Asia. And here we are 30 years later. Oh, shit.
Number 2 on the news, Cam. Number 2, Photoshop AI release.
Well, before we move on from NVIDIA, like I've seen a lot of gnashing of teeth by game developers and animators and people like that in Reddit and on TikTok since that announcement came out. People going, that's it, my job's over. Like, do you know how many people get paid by gaming companies to animate NPCs and these different things happening in the background and writing the dialogue, voiceovers, all that kind of stuff? If NVIDIA's technology is as good as it has been made to look in the demo and rolls out, there's a whole bunch of people whose jobs are probably at risk, like the writers in Hollywood that are still on strike and the actors in Hollywood that are on strike, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, the second one, the big one for me, is Photoshop's AI beta that came out in the last couple of weeks. Been playing around with that, seen a lot of amazing demos of it on TikTok and in Reddit. For people who haven't had a play with this yet, it's pretty amazing stuff. You look up some of the demos on TikTok or YouTube. It has this function just called generative fill. You can pull up a photo of, you know, yourself or whatever. You can select, it has a tool which will automatically select the subject in the photo. You can invert that and select the background, tell it to delete the background and then replace the background with anything you like. I took a photo of my co-host on my history shows, Ray Harris. He'd sent me a photo last year of him posing in his living room with a cute little look on his face, wearing a t-shirt that I sent him. I cut him out using Photoshop, said, put him in a standing in the Italian countryside with an easel, put a Renaissance painter's hat on his head, a brush between his teeth, and a painter's smock. And you just write that in English like you would in GPT, English language instructions. Boom, it builds it for me. It did all the photoshopping of his picture for me. I've seen people do amazing things, like photographers who have taken a portrait of somebody. They drop it into Photoshop, expand the canvas so it's landscape, and just say to Photoshop, sorry, fill in the background. And it takes the background that's in the photo and then figures out what it would look like if it was landscape, and does, in the demos you see it's a perfect job. Now I've used it to do that, and the results have been disastrous more often than not. It doesn't always do a great job, but again, it's a beta tool. It's early days. The ability to manipulate images using Photoshop with this AI built in is getting close to being mind-blowing. Have you had to play with it yet?
Yeah, I have. And I've seen some people have had more time to play with it on the social forums, as you mentioned. Here's the thing. It reminds me of what Andreessen said. And I think it was probably 15 years ago now, close to. He said
Mark
software
Andreessen,
is
the
Mark,
founder of Netscape.
Yeah, Mark Andreessen, who is now a famed VC in Andreessen Horowitz. He's got a bit weird, as all billionaire VCs do, but he's a very insightful man. And he said that he wrote a piece, I think it was in the New York Times, saying software is eating the world. Mm-hmm. And I think you can even go a little bit further back to Buckminster Fuller, who said that he had this idea of ephemeralization, where he said, with enough information, you can create everything from nothing. And this is where we're going, because think about all of the jobs that'll be replaced, a little bit like what you said with the writer's strike and the game animators and the VO people. All of a sudden, you don't have to be anywhere. You don't have to do those photo shoot. You don't have to have all of the photographers and the equipment and the hardware. All this software just does stuff for you, and it's quite extraordinary. Of course, the software needs to be trained on something real, but eventually the software will train itself on software. So, or what the software generates, rather than data that is created from real photography. And it really will be, I think, to double down on what we saw with NVIDIA, is there's going to be a lot of jobs that are displaced. It's just a fact, because the economic reality is, if I run a company or you run a company and there's a way to do something cheaper that's maybe not even as good or maybe better, you're going to take that every single time. That's what the capitalist system rewards. And so a lot of people have to rethink what they do. But I'm always reminded that 200 years ago, 90% of people worked directly in food production. Now it's about 1%.
Yeah, I don't think we've done a show since the writer's strike in Hollywood, but I've been telling people I think this will go down in history as the first large industrial action to protect workers or a particular sector from AI eating their jobs. The writer's strike is about more than just AI, but it's definitely one of the things that they're worried about. The actors are going on strike as well. I think in June, a friend of mine, actually Taylor's girlfriend, she's an actor in LA. She's been over here for the last couple of weeks and has been sort of giving me insight into what's happening. SAG and these other organizations that represent Hollywood talent, they're all worried, obviously, about how this is going to eat their lunch. And, it's hard to see how they're going to avoid it altogether. I mean, they might be able to kick the can down the road a little bit, but it's really hard for me to see how they're going to avoid getting eaten by some of their jobs and some of the work anyway, getting eaten by AI. I think one of the things the writers are worried about is studios saying to something like ChatGPT, write me a 100-page screenplay on this idea. Come up with 50 ideas for a movie that's like these 5 movies that were big hits. Then write me a draft of a screenplay, and they'll do a couple of drafts using AI, and then they'll get a pinch hitter in to a script doctor, as they call them in Hollywood, to come in and fix it up and make it look good. But there's a lot of money for a lot of script writing that just isn't on the table anymore.
Well, in the style of Quentin Tarantino. I mean, the one thing is that you might not get a new voice. In the same way that when we industrialized manufacturing, things went from bespoke to they come out of the factory. Everyone has furniture that looks like IKEA and the same types of cars and the same soap and the same jars of jam in their cupboard. And so what we'll get is increased efficiency, reduced variety and nuance, which isn't necessarily good. And then you have that for a generation, and then the bespoke things arrive again where things are handmade and crafted. You know, I always think about the scene in Fight Club where he talks about the furniture that he was buying, and he's like, and I had the beautiful glasses with the imperfections and bubbles, which are made by the indigenous peoples from wherever. You know, it's like, and so that bubbles up, but it takes a generation, right, where we go through the efficient version first. But I would also posit that we may have seen the last ever movie stars. Let's think this through. So you've got Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Cruise, and Brad Pitt, and it's like, and Scarlett Johansson. It's like, well, okay, if we can have someone just in their meat body do all the maneuvers and then change it slightly so that the voice and the face is Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt can stay home and eat pizza and get paid to license his likeness, and we get someone else to do all of the acting, or we just do it all visually. Why would you invest in a new movie star?
And why, like my son Fox, who's 9, how old are your kids now?
11 and 13.
Do you think they give a shit who Brad Pitt or
Don't care.
Tom Cruise?
No, they
right?
don't. They don't. I mean, they're from a different age, and my boy loves Mr. Beast, right? That's his new movie star, right?
Yeah, mine too. Except I banned him from YouTube, so he couldn't watch Mr. Beast anymore. But you know, my view on this has changed over the last month or so. I think where it's going to start and be most prevalent is in gaming, as we talked about, and then also in animated films. Like if they were to make a new Pixar film tomorrow, and it was all generated by AI, and the voices were done by AI, the story was written by AI, the animation was done by AI, the voices were voiced by AI, I don't think the normal 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid is going to care that Tom Hanks isn't doing the voice of Woody and that Jack Black's not doing the voice of Kung Fu Panda. They don't care. That's for the adults. The adults go,
exactly.
Oh, Jack Black.
I know Jack. Bring on Jack. I'll watch it because Jack is in the house.
Yeah, but the kids don't care. No. It may help, get the parents into the cinema with the kids, and you get a little bit of increased box office for that. But is it worth the trade-off for the amount of money you need to pay these people to do this stuff if you can just push these things out? So I think it'll start with that. And then, I was having this conversation with Taylor a couple of weeks ago. By the time Fox, who's 9, is 19, 10 years from now, I care. I watch Succession. I think we've talked about this on an earlier episode. Yeah. What a great finale this week.
Perfect.
So great.
Perfect that Tom got the gig. There was just some perfection in that, wasn't there?
The biggest ass-kissing loser gets the top job because he's an ass-kissing loser.
It was perfection.
Yeah. Perfection. But anyway, I people of our generation love it because the writing is great, the acting is great, the direction is great, and all of that.
Art, everything, down because to the final detail.
But we grew up watching films and loving De Niro and Coppola and Pacino and Tarantino and Kubrick and that kind of stuff. My son Fox, who's 9, when he's 19, will he care about that stuff?
No, he won't. He won't care about it the same way I don't care about mine. It definitely is a generation thing. And this is the point, is that what we have to do in business and in society, one of the art forms going forward is understanding when we care it's AI and when we don't. And I want to say Pareto principle, 80% of the time we won't care. It'll be like, just give me the thing that I want and I don't care how it got here. Right? Yeah. I don't care how the sausage was made. Just give me the sausage. Yeah.
Just give me my iPhone. I don't care that it's made by slave labor by Foxconn.
Of course it is. Who have to, that there has to be nets for people committing suicide, jumping out the window just to ricochet back in and make another iPhone, right? That's what that is.
Bounce right back in.
Bounce right back in, right? So
it's dark,
but it's super dark, right? And I love it. You're designed in California, and it's beautiful. Everything's beautiful except for the reality, except for what's under the bonnet, right?
Exactly. A little thing on the back case. How many suicides were involved in the production?
I think they should have that. Have suicides in the production of this iPhone.
Suicide meter.
Yeah, a suicide meter, right? And Tim Cook, privacy is a human right, a fundamental human right. but committing suicide from making too many iPhones, let's
That's a choice.
That's a choice, that one there. So
Hey,
I don't think we'll care about when things are produced by AI, but there will be that small little slither of society where it'll be this whatever was made without any artificial intelligence or enhancements, in the same way that we look at that with food. But it's going to be a long period of time, and the majority of time we won't care.
Yeah. One thing I just want to go back to our GPU conversation before I looked it up. My mate Jeremy Wagstaff, who's a tech journalist, I subscribe to his newsletter, came out with an article back in April where he was talking about this. He said plugging GPT into Microsoft search engine Bing requires 20,000 8 GPU servers, meaning it'll cost the company $4 billion. Reuters quoted SemiAnalysis as calculating it would cost Alphabet, some $3 billion if they added ChatGPT style AI to their search. So just harkening back to your point that these GPU manufacturers are having a feeling. I know Elon just bought 10,000 for XAI, his AI company, when he's trying to shut down AI.
That's to give him time to catch up. This is, I mean, the regulatory thing, and that's on our agenda later, often is a ruse so that the others can catch up. Yes, because, by the way, Elon wants to go live on another planet. Don't worry about fixing the one we're on. Let's just go into an unlivable, dust ball. But,
well, I think it might be. He thinks it's probably too late for that.
Look, I would love Elon to go to Mars. That's all I'm saying. I think you should go, Elon. I think you should go. And speaking of Elon, Cam, speaking of Elon,
we're 20 minutes into a 10-minute segment. Elon Musk's Neuralink that we talked about, I think in episode 2, and I said that he had said at the time, like at the end of last year, he thought they were about 6 months away from getting approval from the FDA in the United States to start clinical trials implanting chips in human brains. He now has that approval. 26th of May, article in the ABC News in Australia. Elon Musk's brain implant company Neuralink says it has received a green light from the US Food and Drug Administration to kickstart its first in-human clinical study, a critical milestone after earlier struggles to gain approval. So not much more to say about that, except it looks like that is about to start.
Look, inhuman or inhumane, I looked into this, Cam, and actually, I mean, we talked about, who's going to go first. And actually, the answer to that question is there. And the people that will go first are those that have nothing to lose. So those that have some disabilities where, for example, they can't control their arms or the legs because they've had breaks within their nervous system or spinal damage or other forms of damage. And look, this is, again, you need to have some sensitivities here. But the idea that you would test, I think, as we do with a lot of drugs, people who are terminally ill or have disabilities, that's the right place to do it. And if they can regain certain function, then this could be interesting. I just want to add that, again, there's not much to say on this, but the one thing that I do think with the furor about AI taking over and P-doom, which is, the probability that AI is going to take over the world, and a lot of AI researchers have a P-doom. I actually agree with Elon, and grates on my soul saying this, but I think the idea of merging with machines is the best insurance we can have on AI taking over. Because if we have the same computational ability and we have biological intelligence enhancements, then we can play on the same field as AI. So if we merge with the machines, it's not them and us, it's we are the machine. I mean, of course, we become a hackable species, right? And if you got hacked, would you know it? But I do think that's the path for us.
Yeah. I agree, but we're 23 minutes now to a 10-minute segment, so let's move on to the deep dive, the double D. I love double Ds, Steve. I know you do too. What do you want to double D down on this week in the next 10 minutes? I wanted
to double D on regulation. So we've had the man who's going to be on the magazine. Here's a prediction. Time Person of the Year will be Sam Altman. That's my prediction. And I think that the regulation AI, he went cap in hand to Washington begging for regulation Of course, I think on the one hand, that is so that it can slow down all of his potential competitors to have more hurdles that they need to jump over.
Yeah, particularly the open source AI community that's quite burgeoning.
Well, that's where a lot of the things like the agent GPTs and baby AGI and all of that have come from. But the thing that I think is interesting is that we've been here before, Cam. We've actually had industries which were crying out for regulation and took a long time. And the two most pertinent ones on the deep dive here are consumer goods, so products that you eat and medicines. And the other ones were occupational health and safety and car safety. So to give the listeners a bit of history, we had tooth drops in Australia that had cocaine in them. I think they're probably a lot cheaper than whatever that might cost on the street. We had cough medicine that had heroin in it from Bayer Corporation. Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. 7-Up had lithium in it, the stuff that powers your laptop. That was in it. It was lithiated 7-Up. That was its core selling proposition when it came in. Basically, it was a crapshoot. Whenever you had a packaged good on what you ate, people ingested all of these things, and then the government said, hey, wait a minute, maybe we need nutrition panels. Maybe we need ingredients lists. And I think that's kind of an example of where we might go. What has gone into the training data set? What sort of information does it come out? At the moment, we have technology which is a free-for-all where anyone can launch anything with no testing, no consequences, no anything. It's like it's self-regulated, which is Latin for no regulation. And so we've done this before. We're acting like this is new and hard and difficult. It's not hard. It's not new. It's not difficult. It's really easy. You say, if anything goes wrong on your product, you're responsible, even if there's a tenuous link. I mean, we had cars that had wooden brakes that caught on fire when you tried to slow down. There was no such thing as safety belts, airbags, all those things required regulation. And what we need is to have a serious discussion where we look at history to help guide us towards the future. Because one of the things that you need to have in a civilized society is civilized technology. And that's what we need. And it seems as though we are lauding innovators as though they have special rights and the rules do not apply to them like they do to other industries. Yeah, the chemical industry was the most profitable industry from 1950 to about 1975 when the EPA came in America and then other countries. They should just put their effluent into the river. No wonder they were so profitable. And here you've got AI that has no consequences of what they do. Social media and tech companies that can just make whatever they want. Of course, they're profitable. They don't pay for their raw materials and they don't pay for their externalities. And so this regulation is what's needed. We've been here before. We need to remind the regulators and government that we can do it. And I think we need to do it pretty quick. And that's the deep dive, Cam boy.
I agree with what you say. There's a lot of challenges with this, though. But let me go back a step. We mentioned at the beginning, slightly facetiously, about Sam Altman going cap in hand and saying, yes, the industry, the sector needs to be regulated. Partly, I suspect, in order to protect himself. It's up to the government now to do the regulation.
Yeah, you have to hand over that to them to reduce your risk. Say, hey, wait a minute, I went into Congress.
And also partly, as we said, to make it more difficult for competitors. So there's a moat there, and here's the thing. Anyone who's read enough business history knows that businesses, leaders in businesses, people that have already got a bit of a head start in a particular category of product or service delivery, have quite often throughout history used government regulation to target their competitors.
Yes.
If you are the big guy, this goes back to like Thomas Edison versus Tesla. It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have the right contacts in government, enough money to grease the wheels, you can not only get them to push in regulations that are going to make it hard for your competitors, but quite often you will write the regulations based around
consult the
your
industry.
Favor. Yeah.
Industry consultation. Oh my God.
Yeah, and on my bullshit filter series, we're constantly coming up with stories about sectors that have written legislation. Particularly, this happens a lot in the US, where the industry will write the legislation. It'll pass through Congress almost unedited from the way that the industry wrote it. No one reads it. No one understands
Yeah.
it. Not even the senators or the congressmen and women. Of course, AI may enable us to do that better, but not that I think anyone really is going to take the time or the effort to pay attention to it. But so that's not new. But of course, the challenge that everyone in the US is talking about when it comes to regulating US AI developers is anything that the US does isn't going to stop China from building AI. They've got this problem with TikTok that they've been struggling with for the last few years. Oh shit, a Chinese company came and ate our social media lunch. And I'm not sure if I think we did talk about this on an earlier episode. We know there is substantial evidence that the US government's issues with TikTok and spying, et cetera, is the result of a propaganda campaign paid for by Facebook, aka Meta, through a Republican PR firm to create fear and anxiety
100%.
around TikTok because Facebook wasn't able to compete with TikTok. They couldn't build a social video app that was a successful. Instagram couldn't compete, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can't beat them, destroy them, or get the government to force them to sell their business to you or shut them down or whatever. And it's not just in the US, of course. Then the US government's tendrils go out to other Western allies and says, hey, we're doing this. You need to do it too if you want access to our sweet, sweet economic coercion. So that's going to be a real challenge, though. Unlike, say, car safety belts, and unlike putting cocaine in Coca-Cola, this is something that they're going to struggle with because it doesn't matter what laws you have in the US. If China has their own AI, Russia has their own AI, et cetera, this is, it's going to be very difficult for them to prevent American consumers. Like, it's going to be very difficult if they try and pull TikTok out of every phone in America. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's going to be very, very difficult. If a Chinese AI becomes very, very popular and very, very successful 6 months from now, unless the WTO gets involved or something like that, it's going to be very difficult. We know we're in this massive trade war, economic war, soon to be a military war between the US and China for global dominance, global hegemony.
Now you're scaring me, Cam. This is not one of your war podcasts. Now I'm getting scared. It's soon to be.
AI is going to be one of the key fronts, as is chip manufacturing, which we already know. The only reason the US gives a shit about Taiwan and its independence is because
chip manufacturers there.
All the chips get manufactured in Taiwan, and they don't want China getting their hands on that, because if China gets their hands on 90% of the world's chip manufacturing, it's over. They
need to spend every cent they can to open up as many chip manufacturing countries as they can and get all the raw materials that go into renewables and chips and all of that. I mean, it's a real heavy game. And you're right. The problem with regulation now versus the industrial age is that we don't have geographic boundaries on what we do. And the protection isn't just about products and consumption. It's about geopolitical hegemony. And so you have this issue where China won't stop their AI development. They couldn't give two hoots if we stop it. Like, that's where that pause idea doesn't work. Well, unless every country in the world signs up, and even if they do sign up and then they're underground doing some development without anyone knowing, you're not going to have it.
The counter argument, though, is I'm sure that Xi Jinping doesn't want a rogue AI to take over China and take over all of the hard work that they've put in. He's got a 500-year plan. He wants to stick to the 500-year plan. He wants AI to be ambitious, part of the 500-year plan, not to derail it. So there's probably some common ground there, like the common ground where the world came together to fight Islamic fundamentalist terrorism 20 years ago, where we came together to do something about COVID a couple of years ago. Yeah. I think there's a lot of overlapping interests and common ground.
The overlap is, I think, the P-doom on AI. Like, are we worried about AI's, they call it the alignment problem. What if AI doesn't align with human interests? And it doesn't matter which country you are, you need that, because without that, then there is nothing. So that's the one area you could, should, and would regulate against. The problems on how it serves up misinformation in different economies, I don't think you're going to get geopolitical alignment on that.
And you've got the other issues, obviously, with China and the Chinese firewall and what China is willing to let its citizens have access to in terms of information and what they're not.
This is a good point, Cam, just on that. I just would love to hear your thoughts on, would the AIs being developed by, the Tencent and the other big, or Alibaba, the big Chinese tech companies, would their AIs be less effective because their databases are even more biased than the databases than Western market AIs have been trained on, given the great firewall of China, and you can't have anything negative, and it all needs to be, let's say, government sponsored or above board on their public web? Or are they training on data from Western markets as well? I imagine they are, but you would think that the language interchange on training an AI in different primary languages has an impact where it can't be as effective in a transliterated way.
Yeah, there would be some tricky things they would need to navigate around in order to avoid, this kind of conversations that they don't want to have happen. But, in terms of medical technology, technological innovation, all of the stuff really that we're excited about, the potential of AI, its ability to read all of the world's research on cancer or on, new chip technologies or whatever it is, solving climate change, the cool stuff, the killer app stuff. I don't think there's any worries.
The social issues aren't the thing, are they? They're not in that.
No.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to be concerned.
Yeah, I think
too
you're
much
right
about that. But it is but the whole divide here is going to be a challenging thing. Anyway, we're 12 and a half minutes into a 10-minute segment, Steve. We need to move on. Steve, I'm talking faster than usual. I sound like I'm you now, and I've done 4 lines of coke before I sit down. Technology time warp, Steve. In every episode we tend to talk about the way it was because we're old men. Is there something in the past that you want to talk about that has relevance to what's happening today?
I happened upon an article, and I'll call this the tech time warp. It's interesting how history repeats itself. And in the time warp, I just want to think about companies that banned the internet. And I've got this list here of companies who have banned the use of ChatGPT on any corporate computational device, phone, laptop, whatever. And the list is pretty surprising. So here's who it includes: Apple, JP Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, Verizon,
they are a bunch
Northrop
of douches,
Grumman, Samsung, douchebag, Amazon, Accenture, and there was a whole lot of other small players, but I picked those out as big companies.
Education departments around the world.
Education departments, many of them around the world. I find that really extraordinary that you would just out and out ban it. Now, here's what they've done. They've cited privacy concerns, because one of the things that you can do with these AIs, because they're prompt driven and they're text prompting to give the results, is that you can take documents that are internal that it hasn't been trained on, but it can then assess the document, which then goes into the database. So it could be a private document. Let's say it's a corporate document about a client's files, but you wanted to analyze something. So you put it into that engine, and then it spits out the question that you've asked it based on that data. But that data then now sits in, because I know everyone read the terms and conditions, Cam, and now sits in the database of OpenAI. And so most of them are citing that as the reason to not use it. But I'm just wondering, is this just back to the future where people were not allowed to use the internet in companies? I had companies. The first company I worked for when the internet became graphical was Kimberly-Clark. Internet was banned for 2.5 years. And then we had clients saying, can I email that to you? And we had to embarrassingly go and say, look, we're not allowed to have the internet. Like we were grade school kids. Sorry, it's banned in our company. We're not allowed to watch TV until the weekends. It was like we weren't allowed. It was so embarrassing. And I find it ironic because all of these companies have had data breach. Every company worth its salt has had a data breach and has all sorts of information that really could be leaked anywhere. I just feel like here we are again, firms spamming something on ill-conceived ideas. And
this kind of this plays into the regulation conversation too. I mean, the problem, one of the other problems I meant to mention with regulation is governments, lawmakers move very slowly. They're very slow to. Anyone who watched, was it Zuck's last congressional hearing? And people are like, the questions coming out of the senators and the congressmen and women about their inability to understand how Facebook works. The same with TikTok.
Yeah.
When the TikTok executives are being grilled, the understanding of these 85-year-old white men in Congress of how TikTok works was truly embarrassing. And so they tend to move slowly, and AI is obviously moving insanely fast. So there's this disconnect here between the regulatory power's ability to catch up and keep pace with this. And it's the same with corporations. Like, we know corporations move very slowly when it comes to technology. Usually, the larger the corporation, the slower they move. Yeah. And a lot, it wasn't that long ago, honestly, when I know that senior executives of Telstra, whilst owning the backbone of the internet in Australia, were still getting their emails printed out by their secretaries, and they would write answers on the emails and give them back to the secretaries who would then type them into the email computer. This is only like 10 or 15 years ago. This was still going on. It probably is still going on, honestly, in some places. I think Warren Buffett doesn't own a computer. But he's, 93, so he gets a pass maybe. And he's
to have more than 100 billion is kind of another reason why you can do what the fuck you want.
But they're going to move slowly, as they did with the internet 30 years ago. It's going to be slow for them to figure out. The people that are the fast movers may have an advantage. Being a fast mover also comes with risks, and you have to be fairly nimble to assess those and address those. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, Steve. I do expect that a lot of organizations, like they built their intranets 20 odd years ago, will be building local GPT versions. There'll be a big business from Microsoft and from Google, etc., to say to corporations, hey, you have your own generative AI in your own server farm, protected by a Faraday cage. No one can get in or out. And it will be, your little AI and your
I remember
little
the server.
company.
We had a server room in the first company I worked at, and we had like a server administrator. Servers down, have to turn everything off, and everyone would just talk and have coffee. It's funny.
I remember giving Malcolm Turnbull a tour of the Aussie Mail server.
I love that. That's crazy.
In Melbourne when he owned Aussie Mail.
And this is one of the reasons why it was expensive to get a startup going in the late 90s. It's like, the first thing you did was get funded to get 200 grand's worth of server, right? Because there was no AWS, or there was nowhere you could have anything other than your own laptop.
I haven't told you the story about Scape.
You better tell me.
No, it wasn't Scape. Was it Scape? Yeah, I think it was Scape. Was that Village Roadshow? Anyway, I remember this is going back a while. It's like circa late 90s. I was at Microsoft, and Village Roadshow was one of my clients. They were down the road in the Jam Factory.
Yes,
in
still there.
South Yarra. Still there.
Yeah.
And I remember they had this startup. I think it was a joint venture between them and maybe Channel 10. And I think it was called Scape. There is no Scape was the tagline, I seem to recall. And they were going to do this big digital thing. It was all going to be digital movies, digital this, digital that. And I remember they bought something like, 75 top of the line IBM servers to put in their server farm at the Jam Factory. And I got a tour of it one day. They spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on this, and they were doing nothing. They had nothing to put on these servers, but the IBM sales rep did a great job.
Of course he did. He installed everything. Of course he did.
And
he still talks about it at barbecues, that IBM sales rep. This weekend, he's going to talk that up.
The first project they were going to do was a live stream of the Victoria's Secret catwalk
now you're talking.
Ladies in lingerie.
Goodness
and
me.
real networks, the sales rep from real networks. Remember
Real net. I
networks?
remember real player. That was when there was
Real
a
player.
battle. Like, what format are we going to use?
Yeah.
There was like,
One of the
look, I'd
first
send it to you, but it's the wrong format. It's the wrong format. Wrong
One of the
video
first
format.
audio and video streaming plays came out of a guy who was a Microsoft exec who left and did the startup. They bought the bloody Village Roadshow Escape bought the rights to do, I think it was like 100 million real-time streams of, it might have been less, might have been 1 million real-time streams of this thing. They bought, I had to pay for like seats
per stream. Oh, right. There you go. Yeah.
They were going to 1 million. And I remember sitting in a meeting room and asking somebody, what's the record for the highest number of concurrent streams that's been done today? And it was like 50.
Oh, they bought a million. I love that.
They bought
I just want to make sure we've got capacity here, Cam. Make sure you've got capacity.
And when the business went bankrupt, like a year later, they got rid of all of those IBM servers, sold them on the black market for 2 cents in the dollar. I'm not sure how much they got for their real networks, but the real networks guy, it must have been the best night ever at headquarters.
I love that. So we could start another podcast called Corporate Tomfoolery. All the shit they did that was always broken.
Look, we're going to see a lot of this stuff too. We're going to see a lot of really crazy businesses spending a really crazy amount of money doing really crazy shit. There will be businesses that will make fortunes and lose fortunes around AI. The cowboys will be out in full force, as they always are. Whenever there's a new technology that no one really understands, it's prime opportunity for psychopathic cowboys to run around and sell shadows to people, sticky tape and chewing gum things that sound good on a whiteboard, but really there's nothing behind it.
Yeah,
we're going to see
and
all
you
of
need
this
that.
stuff
You kind of need
again.
that, Tam. You need these crazy ideas, because unless we have 100 of those thrown at the wall, you don't know what's going to stick. Because often I think the unlock in an industry is something kind of unexpected. For me, the big unlock with the iPhone, I think we spoke about it, was the GPS, because that created a whole lot of things. And that wasn't even one of the core selling propositions when Jobs unveiled it. And so GPS creates Airbnb and Uber and dating apps. So we don't know what the unlock is with AI, but what you need to do is have a heap of experimentation and wasted money to find it. And that's the job of VCs. That's the job of entrepreneurs. And we should laud the fact that you have, during economic revolutions, a whole lot of wasted money, which finds the path.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's a fairly wasteful way of finding the path.
But this is interesting, right? But is it wasteful? So let's say I'm startup XYZ and I'm gonna, make AI versions of cat videos, right? Whatever. Okay. And I waste all this money. But is the money really wasted? Because here's what happens. In fact, it's probably a good thing, because it takes money from venture capitalists, the 1%, and it distributes it out through the economy to get people to make all these bits and pieces on this failed business, right? And then that money gets distributed. So it's kind of like, it's a waste, and maybe it could go to feed people. I mean, I get that. I'm not saying it couldn't go to better things, but the money's there anyway, and it in some way gets distributed through the economy. In some ways, we're worse off when a business becomes successful with VCs, because it aggregates more money to a smaller percentage of people. A failed startup is actually better for the wider economy and the proletariat.
Yeah, you make a good argument. Although, I mean, this is sort of the China model versus the US model side of things, right? There's a lot of money that gets wasted on the US model. It does produce results, whereas the China model, they just figure out what they're going to do. They have their best minds figure out, okay, this is where we want to be 50 years from now. Everyone shut up, get out of the way. We're going to go.
We're doing it anyway. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who the president is. The vision doesn't change. The story doesn't change. The plan doesn't change, unless it has to change. But it's not like new administration comes in, throws out the last 500-year plan and comes up with another one. It's no, we're going to pull 1 billion people out of poverty and we're going to become the economic powerhouse of the planet. Everyone shut up until we get that done. Then we can sit down and talk about it, right? It's more focused, more direct, less wasteful in some ways, although they do waste a lot of money as well on things that never happen, as we know. Anyway, we're 11 and a half minutes into a 10-minute segment, Steve. We need to wrap up with our last 5-minute segment, which is the futuristic forecast. Predicts something that will happen. I've got one for you.
Okay, you go first and I'm going to go second.
And this is a bit of a cheat because it's already happened. In the current presidential campaigns in the United States leading up to the 2024 election next year, candidates, mostly Donald Trump, but probably not Donald Trump alone, will be using fake videos of his opponents, both within the GOP and Democratic, if he wins the nomination, fake videos of them saying and doing things they didn't say and do, using face swap technology, using AI voice replacement technology, etc., whatever else comes along the pipeline. They'll be on the cutting edge of putting out fake videos. And it's already happened. He did one recently this week, making fun of somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they pitched it as a joke. And this is how it'll start, is, well, that was obviously, we did that as a joke. Obviously, we're playing around, we're taking the piss, it's all done, and it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye, right? It'll start off.
Goodness,
that's what
me.
I tell my kids.
It's all fun and games, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It'll start off like that, but it gradually, as time goes on, it will become more and more sinister. And by the time of the election next year, I predict we will be seeing copious amounts of AI-generated video and audio content that it will take a team of experts to figure out whether it's real or whether it's not real. And there will be no consequences because, when are there ever consequences for people doing shit?
Not for tech people. Not for tech people.
Durham just came out with his report in the last couple of weeks in the US to say basically that the Clinton campaign manufactured the whole Trump-Russiagate scenario and sold it to the FBI, and the FBI went along with it, even though there was no evidence to back it up. Where are the consequences for all of that? The wall-to-wall Russiagate coverage there was for 4 or 5 years? Nothing, nada, zip. There will be none. Everyone will just skate because we've moved on and no one wants to go back and worry about it. That's my prediction. What's yours?
Okay, so my prediction is going to build on yours. I just changed it live because I had one that wasn't nearly as exciting as yours. So that's what we do here. My prediction is after this election, regardless of who wins, the result in America won't be accepted. And that'll be the moment that we get serious about regulating AI and having massive legal consequences if something is put into market by someone on saying whether or not it was AI generated or not. That'll be the moment, because I feel like you need a giant flood or a calamity or a war before people take some of this stuff seriously.
In the US, they'll just have regulation eventually where the ad will run and then a voiceover of them will go, "This video was generated by artificial intelligence." No.
It will.
If you take it seriously, that's your fault. You're an idiot.
That is
drug
coming.
ads over there, right?
That's coming with the drug ads. It's like, make sure you see your doctor, your mate, day after you take it. The drug ads are insane over there. Like all the warnings. And guess what? Yeah. And people just keep popping those pills in. What warning? Who cares?
Well, it's a 59-second ad about somebody's life looking great now that they take the drug, and then a very quick 30-second disclaimer saying may make your eyeballs fall out and your balls explode. I mean,
that's right. Greg Giraldo says. Greg Giraldo, the late great comedian, said, "You always love watching these medical drug ads. It's like, do you ever feel tired in the morning? Whatever this is, write this down. I have this. It's like, that disease looks great. It comes with a hot chick and a puppy."
All right. Well, that is Futuristic number 4. Done and dusted. 1 hour in and out.
Yes.
Speaking at the speed of light, because that's how Steve wants it. I love it.
It was tight.
Coked up.
And we can come back next time. I'm not coked up, by the way, people. I play clean.
I have to be now to get this sort of pace to keep up with you.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Have a good week. We'll be back next time on Futuristic. Tell your friends.
Thanks.